Pro Audio Secrets, a show that helps you to find your own voice in sound.
I've been in the industry 20 years. I had this idea in my head that when I get to the top, that's where it's all going to happen. Yeah, come and do your thing, man. You know, do everything you need to do. Yeah, we've got time for you. We've got the money. No.
In the lower third of the screen, this is for me where the Foley happens. The shoulder height and then the footsteps.
No, it's okay, we'll just do this in the studio. It's almost nothing worse than hearing those words as a boom operator because it just takes away everything that you're trying to achieve.
It's so hard to build the reputation, but you can lose it in 1 second.
Can I find something that gives me the same magic that I was looking for, but working with people that respect me and having more time for family or for life in general, just being a person?
Is it possible to change my career within the audio industry from one thing to the other in my 30s, in my 40s? If you ask yourself that question, this podcast episode is for you. I am talking with my friend Sam Sirajuddin Cousins, who is a professional boom operator working on high-level Hollywood productions, and his goal is to become a professional within the post-production field. And I'm basically helping him achieving that goal by mentoring him in my studio to become my mixer and recordist. And in this conversation, we talk about the process that we went on together in the last 9 months, basically, the obstacles that we came across, how we managed them, and also about his life and how he actually wanted to change his career from one thing to the other. And if you resonate with all these topics and you want to not only maybe change your career from one thing to the other, but also maybe elevate your career within the audio industry, then this episode is really for you. Enjoy. All right, here we go. The dream team doing a podcast. Sirajuddin Sam Cousins, my friend and student and mentee. Can you tell me a little bit about your personal story and how you came to be from living a life on set as a boom operator to being like my companion and learning Foley with me?
Well, it's a story that spans many years in a way, isn't it? Because we've been connected for a long time, but we never really connected in a sound way, you know, until last November, which is when we hooked up in Morocco, and we kind of been on the periphery of each other's existence sonically, like sound-wise. I knew you were in the game business, and particularly from the podcast, Abdullah's podcast. And I remember, because I helped set up his podcast, I remember talking to him during the making of it, you know, how much I enjoyed yours, and it was so good to hear your story and how you were doing the dream job. And he remembered that. And when we all met up in Morocco, he said, dude, why didn't you mention to Musa about to Bastian about this being a dream job? Well, you know, something could happen. You never know. I said, okay, I'll do it. So we chatted a little bit about it. I told you my thoughts. I can't remember exactly how the conversation went. Do you remember anything?
I think you have to go a step back because to really understand the full picture, we basically met, 15 years ago.
At least.
When I became Muslim, I joined the same community that you joined. Maybe even 10 years earlier as a teenager. So we both converted to Islam. And you had your journey in sound, teaching at a film university in London. You taught sound there, but you also worked on set. And you did that in the UK, where you're from. And you also did that in Budapest, where you married towards and then lived there for 10 years.
Yeah.
So you were boom operating on the high value Hollywood stuff that was shot in Budapest.
Yeah.
And I'm doing my Foley thing now for the last 15 years. Basically, shortly after I became Muslim, I changed from being a rapper towards learning film sound and post-production, and then went into game audio for 5 years. And then I started this whole social media presence. And that's when actually this podcast came into play from Abdullah.
Yeah.
Because I remember early on, I wanted to just have some visibility or some training. And then I thought, okay, this podcast from Abdullah is really cool. It wasn't really about sound in particular, but I know him
It's your
personally.
journey. Yeah.
It was more about the journey. So I just reached out to him, telling him like I like your podcast, and would you want me to be on one of the episodes as well? And that's how the whole thing came. So I didn't know that you helped him set up the podcast.
Yeah.
I just knew that you were basically also the sound guy within the community, because when we went to events and people just talked to me, what you doing these days? Yeah, I'm doing movies for films, whatever. I said, yeah, you have to talk to Siraj because he's also in the sound business.
Same. Yeah.
But you were like on the other side of the sound business.
And doing this now, it shows me exactly how different the jobs are. You know, I'm just doing dialogue, just focusing on dialogue, and you're doing everything except dialogue. So it's been such a huge shift of perspective.
So being on set as a boom operator, that is what you basically did for 20 years as a professional.
Yeah.
And on the highest level as well.
Not 20 years on the highest level, but...
Of course, but there's always a journey.
Totally, yeah.
So can you explain the difference between working on set as a boom operator, focusing on the sound, versus now being in the studio, post-production, and focusing on the sound here?
Well, there are lots of differences, and there are a few parallels as well. One of the parallels that springs to mind is when we first talked about doing footsteps, is how I talked about being a boom operator. You often follow the footsteps of the actor to not make more footsteps than is necessary on a set. You know, if they're walking and talking, you don't want two sets of footsteps when there's only one person in screen. So you learn to walk and talk with the actor. You know, whoever you're following with the boom, you follow their footsteps. So that's one thing that sort of naturally follows on from doing that to doing this. You know, looking at the screen, looking at the actor, following the footsteps.
That's what a Foley artist does.
Essentially, yeah.
And now you did that on set, holding the boom and syncing up the footsteps and the motion
as
of
much
the
as
actor.
Possible, like climbing over grip equipment and, you know.
Yeah, but that's amazing. That's really
that's part of the creative side of boom operating. There isn't a huge amount of creativity allowed with boom operating. There's one place really for the mic to go, essentially, you know, as close as possible to the mouth and out of frame. But once you've got that, everything else around that is the creative part. So making sure that sound in that small space is clean of all the sounds that we make here.
And you focus on the dialogue only. That's why you
clean
match
dialogue is the key,
footsteps, that you don't have like double impact footsteps on the dialogue track. So everything is focused around.
Carpets on the floor wherever you can, where they're out of shot, so you don't get the footsteps. So then we can do clean footsteps on top of their dialogue.
In post-production.
In post, yeah. So it's same with props. You know, any prop that they're using, a bottle on set, you know, put some foam on the bottom so when it goes on the table, there's no impact sound, so that when we're in post, you can lay the impact sound on top and it's not in the way of the dialogue. So it's all about saving the performance on set. It's preserving the performance that the actor gives based on the environment that they're in at the time, which is high pressure. They've got the director there, they've got everybody looking at them, they've put themselves in the zone. And to my understanding, that's the only place you can get that performance. You go to a studio afterwards and to do ADR replacement dubbing, you can't replicate all of that pressure, all of that emotion that you're under. So you have to try and preserve it when it's done on set, and you do that by making sure everything else is quiet except for that thing that you need, which is the dialogue, because everything else can be replaced. But that dialogue, that performance that we all respond to as human beings, the voice, that's the key. That's the thing.
Yeah. And that leads us towards how you record Foley, because from my understanding, as you mentioned, the voice, you know, that's the key part of the performance that we have on screen in a way.
Yeah,
like
in a way, because it's not really fair, because, you know, it's all here as well. It's here and it's here, you know, so the eyes. And,
let's say the face
the voice,
and the, like, where is the face on the screen, right? That's always
totally.
In the upper third, let's say, more or less. Yeah, this is a basic rule of filming, maybe even, and you see that on screen. And when you record the voice as clear as possible, so you don't have any high cut filters, or maybe you control the low end a little bit, but you have as much frequency as possible, as clear as possible, as natural as possible. That's always the goal, right? That's why you have the boom there, and not only the clip mics that are a bit stuffy and muffled. And
well, they only have one perspective, and that's from here.
Yeah.
With the boom, you can match perspective based on the size of the shot, or the distance that the camera is in relation to the actor. But with a lapel mic, you can't have that perspective.
And you're close,
always.
Even though the camera gives a wide shot, for example. That's also a very interesting point that you have to keep in mind, like how movies are being made and what sound plays as a role, even recorded on set. But then when we talk about the Foley, now we clarified that the dialogue is in front, is full frequency, is in perspective to the camera, but the Foley is underneath that, because we don't want to compete with the dialogue. We want to give all the emotion to the actor, to the story, and we want to enhance that with the Foley, just to give back everything that you stripped away on set, because you just focused on the dialogue. The cloth movement is not there, the footsteps is not there, or even if it's there, it's distant. So that
in an ideal world, if you're able to work with the wardrobe department on some decent clothes that don't make a noise, on the grip department to get carpets laid down everywhere where the camera department are moving, or where the grip department are moving, where the actors are moving, every department's in sync, then you just have to worry about dialogue, and that's it. That's the only sound that you hear is action, dialogue, cut. Beautiful.
That would be ideal.
Yeah, ideal.
I mean, in the real world, when I recall all the projects that I've worked on, of course, there's always some leftovers from some footsteps maybe, or action on the desk.
If you have a long shot in a long corridor, you can't lay carpets down because you see the floor. Wherever you see the floor, there's no carpets. So you can try and put foam on the feet, but that runs out after a while. Also, you can see it. Sometimes it's squeaky. So there's all these problems that come up, but you try your best to make that happen.
Okay, and that's also for highest level Hollywood productions. I worked mainly in my first 10 years on TV movies. They are like shot much more quicker, fast, and therefore you don't have that. So it's a lot of stuff that's with coming with the dialogue, but not as close as the dialogue. So it's always a bit off, and so it's not in front where the dialogue sits. It sits already a bit more in the back. And the Foley now is in between that, because we don't want like the documentary kind of sound that is distant, that is roomy, that is not connected to the dialogue. We want to fill that gap, but we want it to be behind the dialogue, so and below the dialogue, so that the speech, the voice, they can live in the upper third of the screen, also where in the cinema, the center speaker sits, and then the lower third of the screen. This is for me where the Foley happens, the shoulder height, and then the footsteps even lower than that. So when we record the Foley, for the cloth, for example, I'm using a big diaphragm condenser, as you know now, and we record that in a way that is a bit crisper than the footsteps. The footsteps have more high cut, they are more off-axis recorded, then they are mixed with 2-3 mics, so that we always be on the lower third of the screen, and that when you see the scene, you have that impression like, okay, the face is there, the voice is coming out of the mouth of the actor on screen, and the footsteps are on where the feet are, so even if you don't see them.
Easy to visualize in terms of what you're talking
those layers on the screen.
But achieving that sonically, that's the gift. I mean, that's the task we have in the craft, and the task we have here in the studio. How does one do that then? How would you explain how that's done?
As I just said, we have certain microphones and certain filtering techniques, and then also positioning of the mics. Those are the three, and volume. And then, of course, the main thing is the performance. So how do I perform as a Foley artist? How much emphasizing do I give? How do I move? Do I move towards the microphone, away from the microphone? Do I give more pressure on the floor, less pressure? Do I more like scratch my foot when I'm like rolling off so that I give more texture on the surface, you know? So all these things, and then how you record it. For example, with the cloth movement, we have the big diaphragm condenser mic, which is a cardioid. So giving it like this is to me now, it's like full to the front of the membrane. But then when I move like more to that side, I'm already a bit more off axis, and therefore the sound changes, and I can use that in my performance. So I'm either like just positioning the mic differently like that, and then continue my performance. So I'm more off axis already, and the sound changes without you as a mixer doing anything with it. Or I just move my body a bit far away when I want to perform something into the perspective or the performance of something. So an actor is maybe moving, or I have two people sitting next to each other, but they wear different type of clothing. And one person is closer to the camera than the other. Let's say like you're further away now from the wide shot than I am. And I wear like a leather jacket and you wear like just a t-shirt. So the leather jacket should be more present than the t-shirt. But the leather jacket makes more sound than the t-shirt. So in that case, maybe I have them at the same position on my lap, like this side the leather jacket, this side the cloth, and then I perform the motion like according to how the person is on screen. And if I have to move further away with the leather jacket in order to match the right perspective, I can do that just by moving away. Then I'm a bit more on the off side of the microphone, and therefore the presence is less of the leather. And then I'm here with the cloth.
Yeah.
You are further away from the camera, but I'm also giving less information to the microphone because it's not that heavy sound.
It's done on the fly by ear, right?
Yeah.
You know, you have to do it.
And these things are like practice and also knowledge of how it has to end up on the recording in order
to ask about this
to match the frame.
You've come the whole way to get to be a Foley artist. You've come from assisting editing all the way through to dialogue editing, re-recording, mixing, ADR recording and mixing, all the way through, right? So you've got a unique perspective in terms of you've done the whole. You've even done sound recording as well, haven't you, on set? For some,
that was the beginning,
so
but I was so bad at that.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
So how does that change your perspective on what you're able to deliver? How does that help the delivery?
Yeah, I think it plays a big role for me because, as you said, I came up as an engineer in the music field, and then I switched to the movies and then learned like the editing craft of dialogue, sound effects, and then I was sitting in the mixing sessions as a sound designer. That's how it works in Germany. Like with the big movies, you have all the different people on the mixing stage, like the dialogue editor, the sound effects editors, maybe, and the supervisor, and then also the music editor. They all have their separate Pro Tools, and then it all plays on the big mixing desk, and then you have two mixers mixing the film. Whereas in Germany, even with a small cinema movie, you just have one re-recording mixer and the supervising sound editor, which we call like sound designer. And then that person maybe did everything on his own, like dialogue editing, ambiences, hard effects, Foley editing, or this person just did one thing, but there's just one person sitting there operating the Pro Tools session apart from mixing it. So when something needs to be changed, a waveform needs to be replaced or resized, or you need to have an additional sound effect, or you have to look for an alternative dialogue take, or even the composer is sending new music into the mixing session, then this one person does all that. And I was that person for many years, basically, sitting in mixing sessions with the movies I was working on. Sometimes with all of these disciplines, dialogue editing, and I did the sound design, Foley editing even, and sometimes I only did the dialogue edit and someone else did the sound design and everything else, but I was still sitting there. Or I did then the sound effects, but not the dialogue editing, which was more common basically in the later years. And then the last movies I did, I was then just doing the Foley.
Editing.
No, the Foley performance.
Okay.
But then I wasn't sitting in the mixing stage anymore. Having this perspective from all those years, doing the work, doing the Foley editing, and then sitting in the mixing stage and really see how the Foley plays out, or all the sounds come together and how the Foley has to sound, that the re-recording mixer is happy foremost, and then also the director, of course. Yeah. So that was my way into this whole thing. So I edited Foley for 10 years before I ever first recorded my first Foley take myself. Wow. And I also mixed movies myself. So from sitting there, watching other re-recording mixers, putting my work together. I did student films early on, even in my apprenticeship. But then later in my career, I always took those rare opportunities when the re-recording mixer just gave up, or there was no one that wanted to do that job. I always then said, yeah, okay, I volunteer. It was like always the hardest jobs, but that were basically the only re-recording jobs that I could get. So I jumped on them, and that was a really good school, So I knew how to mix a movie, and also how others mix movies and what Foley is kind of working. So with that knowledge, with that knowledge, I went into becoming a Foley artist. And then the journey, of course, started of how to get to that sound that I know I have to achieve.
Translating
what I have in my head into the performing, and that I get those results. That's a long journey, of course. But without that knowledge, I definitely would have needed a experienced Foley mixer.
You had a mentor, right? You had for a while.
Yeah, but just a quick thing in my case. My mentor was basically Carsten Rey, who had his own studio. It's still running, I believe. It's called Cinesound in Berlin. And he has just a small mixing room and then a hybrid ADR Foley room. But it's very small. It's like smaller than my studio now. Half of the size, maybe even the recording room of his studio. And he showed me basically how to do those modular floors that you see on the floor here, the stone surface, and also a small wooden surface that I even then borrowed from his studio when I was running the show at my employer's place. So I used his wood floor basically for 3-4 months or even longer, until there was even because it was already a very old chipboard that he had on it. Yeah. And he also explained to me, you should have, if you buy a new chipboard, then put it in the garden for 1 year and let it age. And his one was like already, 10 years old. And it has already some loose parts on it. So there's some
flaking off.
Yeah. And then I worked so hard on that surface that when I gave it back, there was even a hole in the thing. So I really shaped it off
You've
even
got
more.
One somewhere, haven't you? You've got a chipboard.
Yeah. This surface stands there in the corner. And we often use it and lay it on top of that wood floor we have now. That was then shown to me by my other colleague that I had later on at Ubisoft from Canada, John Elliott, shoutouts. He showed me how to build those bigger wood floors. And they have a whole science about that in Canada. Like he told me, it has to be 3/4 inch plywood, and then you have to have a hardwood on top of that, and you have to have a softwood frame underneath, and it was very defined.
Nice. Sounds good.
Yeah. So that's the journey.
And that's what you've done.
Yeah.
Softwood, 3/4 inch ply, and hardwood floor.
In that case, this particular floor is exactly the opposite. We built, when we worked at Ubisoft, we went to the Netherlands even, because there was a vintage wood supply store where we could buy the planks, the hardwood planks, and then also vintage planks, which are these are basically vintage softwood, but they're not the real deal. So the softwood is only the surface, and then there's a structure underneath it. So it's basically a fake softwood structure. Yeah. And then the frame that we built around it is a real hardwood from Brazil.
Oh, wow.
This was insane. You couldn't even go through with a normal drill.
Wow.
It's so hard.
Wow.
And therefore insanely heavy, yeah?
Yeah.
It's not very smart to build it like that. But that was just the material we had. So we built one, the opposite, like a 3/4-inch plywood, also is not available in Germany because we don't have 1/4-inch kind of measurements. We have the centimeter metric system. And so there's only 1 centimeter.
16.
So then we used 2 of them. On top of each other, so 2 centimeters comes close to 3/4 inch, and then the hardwood surrounding the frame plus the softwood on top, and then we built another floor with oak hardwood planks and also the 2 centimeter plywood, and then a softwood frame underneath, just with some, from the construction supply store.
How the guy told you to do it. Yeah.
So we built those 2. And they sounded slightly different from each other. That was good. And we both had them in this small booth at Ubisoft. And then when I built my own studio back in Düsseldorf, my first Dolby Atmos room, I then took this floor with me, and I left him the hardwood oak
because
thing.
You preferred this one, or because the other one?
They both sounded good, but he preferred the other one.
Yeah.
So I left him that one. Yeah. And but that's how I learned to build those wood floors. And now we are here in my second studio after me having a divorce and moving out of that house in Düsseldorf, getting rid of my Dolby Atmos equipment, and then rebuilding my life basically here on the countryside. Then we met, as we mentioned in the beginning, in Morocco.
Right, yeah.
So you wanted to change your life.
So I just wrapped on a big movie, and worked with one of the people I'd always wanted to work with. And
who is?
Morgan Freeman. Wonderful experience. But the film in general was not such a wonderful experience, and it really cemented for me the decline, certainly in my part of the world. It might not be the same in other parts. For the UK, I know sometimes sound has a bit more respect than other places.
But what was the decline? Can you explain that?
In the respect for sound, in the acknowledgement of me as a member of a different department that should be given some amount of respect on set. In terms of I know what I'm doing, and let me do what I want to do, or let me do what I think I need to do to get the thing that I need, which is the performance. That's for me, that's the goal, to get the performance. And for me, it's the sonic performance as much as anything else, or at least equally. The picture and the sound should both be important. On this film, it didn't really work like that because, for many reasons. One of the reasons being, there's always money for post-production. So the actors can go to the studio, and they even said it on set many times. It's okay. We'll just do this. Dub this later. We'll just do this in the studio. And there's almost nothing worse than hearing those words as a boom operator, because it takes away everything that you're trying to achieve. Why am I here then? Sort of, situation. And it had steadily been getting worse over time. I've been in the industry 20 years, at least 20 years now, and it hadn't got any better. And I had this idea in my head that when I get to the top, that's where it's all going to happen. People are going to, come and do your thing, man. Do everything you need to do. Yeah, we've got time for you. We've got the money. No, it's just as rushed. It's just as insane. It's just more stuff, more kit, more cameras, more, bangs and crashes and actors and less sound, or less respect for sound. So it was kind of like a turning point for me, where I was like, well, I'm spending upwards of 12 hours, minimum 12 hours a day on set. And then plus travel. If you have overtime, it's 13, 14 hours on set plus travel. So you sleep 4 hours, see your family if you're lucky, and then you're back on set. And why? If you're not getting to be the thing that you had in mind, that sort of the magic that pulls you into the world of film, which is collaborating with others, being part of a team that's working towards a goal of beauty, when all that's gone, what do you have left? You're working your arse off for, okay, the money's not bad, but it's not all year round. You don't get sick pay, you don't get, unemployment. The benefits are not there anymore. So can I find something that gives me the same magic that I was looking for, but working with people that respect me and having more time for family or for life in general, just being a person, not a machine on set, just doing what I'm told with fighting all the time. It can be such a struggle, just fighting with people all day, like just to do your job.
I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for watching up until this point or listening. I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, wherever you're watching or listening, please do so, because it really helps us to grow and to maintain this. We are already past 21 episodes with this podcast, which makes us within the 1% of podcasts. That is already a great achievement. So thank you for riding along with us so far. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. It really helps us. And now let's get back to the episode. So then from that turning point that you realized all the stuff you worked towards to be the best possible boom operator on the best possible productions didn't really work out. And it was so frustrating for you to do this without a, proper result or satisfaction with coming with it. You then heard the podcast episode that I recorded with Abdallah and thought...
I'd heard that before. And I'd mentioned to Abdallah before, I don't know how long before. I think when I first heard it, I called him up and talked to him about it. But he remembered, that's the thing. He remembered my words 2-3 years later when we saw each other. We hadn't seen each other for ages. And we just happened to all be in the same space. And he remembered that I talked about your episode and that I'd said dream job. Somehow.
And is it a dream job now that, because we started the thing then already in January 2025, so only like 6 weeks after we talked about it, you were here flying in from Budapest, and we had the first day together here and the first week basically.
Yeah.
From there was an agreement that we said, okay, 1 month you come as often as you can and you just learn. And then from there, I then offered you to pay you the same that you would earn on set for you coming here and then continue the learning process with me. And is it still a dream job after 6 months?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that first attracted me from what you were talking about was the game aspect of things, where you're literally designing the sounds for a world. So when I said dream job, that was the reference I had in mind. But
because I was working at Ubisoft at the time when I gave the podcast.
Yeah. And I was, I play video games. I like my games. I like my PlayStation. I like my Ubisoft games as well. So I had, I had a flavor of what I would love to do in that world. And you talked about the world and you're somebody I knew. And so, I suddenly saw access to it in a way that, I hadn't seen before. But it's still such a leap from being 20 years in an industry, over 40, to then change careers. It just wasn't a thing that I imagined until you called me and said, we talked about Foley. Are you serious? I think you literally said, were you serious about what you said? And I totally was, and I still am. It. Dream job. So the things I was looking for, when we were in Morocco, before we had the conversation, the things I had an intention to ask from Allah, from God, in this meeting that we had in Morocco, which is a very wonderful spiritual place we were meeting at, was working with Muslims that understand me, that. So one aspect of being on set that I find most hard is finding a place to pray and being in a state to be able to pray. So being clean enough to pray and finding a clean space to pray and having the time to do it. But, you know, I'm standing around a lot of the day, standing around on set, but I'm not standing around doing nothing. I'm waiting for the next thing to happen. So
analyzing what's going on so that you are ready.
If you want to be a good boom operator, you have to know what everything that's going on set and off set as well. You've got to have ears on your boss, ears on set as well with wherever the boom is, and then watching what equipment's coming in, who's going to be mic'd up next. You know, do I need to lay carpets? Do I need to take carpets off? Do I need to change the props? You know, so many things can happen. You've got to be on it all the time. So there's not time to switch off for 5 minutes and go and pray. Even at lunchtime, you know, it's normally a running lunch. So you eat on the move. You eat in your boombox, or you eat on a, you know, whatever. There's no time, no place, and no opportunity. I'm sure if you spoke to the producer or whoever, they'd say, "Oh, no, we'll make time for you." But the reality is that there's no way. It's not realistic. So, of the 5 prayers that we pray in a day, I did one before work, you know, early morning, sunrise, and then the rest when I get home, which could be 11 o'clock at night. And that's been my life for 20 years, pretty much, when I'm on set. And I'm tired of that, you know. I'm tired. And so just a simple thing of being able to pray when it's time to pray, it's a massive thing. So that's part of the dream that I had in mind, was just a simple thing like being able to do that, being able to stop and have 2 minutes to yourself, you know. Anybody that's been on set understands that it's just not possible. You can't take time off. You can't take 5 minutes off. So yeah, in that sense, in the lifestyle sense, also, you know, I'm working with a man that understands me on a different level. You know, we can have conversations in a, you know,
holistic way, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. There's definitely I find it hard to holistic way. That's good. It's a good way of saying it. And the job itself, it's a lot more than I envisaged, a lot more than I imagined, and it's taking a long time to get used to. And like we started with, there are parallels, like the following the footsteps, but apart from the absence of dialogue being one major factor, it is a complete change of mentality in the sense that it's not about getting a clean, full volume signal so that in post-production they can put reverb on it based on where the shot is or who the person speaks. You know, it's not about clean, close sound. It's about matching that place in the screen that you were talking about. You know, finding that place now, here, live, rather than sending it to post. In a way, we are post. We want to give the re-recording mixer, as little as possible to do. Right, that's the goal.
Yes.
And you know, your journey to get there has been being a re-recording mixer at some point as well. So you've had that, and I've been striving for the opposite. You know, for only that
the clean reference.
Yeah. So finding a place for those for that understanding, it's still way off. You know, I'm getting there. But my default, as it has been for 20 years, is, you know, just close, clean. And I have to be reminded often, you know, where's the room mic? Where's the reverb, man? You know, where's the... Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, of course.
So, yeah, we had also that journey, like, within the last 6 months.
Yeah.
From you just learning Pro Tools.
Yeah.
You know, just operating Pro Tools. I explained to you, okay, this is the multi-tool, and when you put the mouse on the upper part of the waveform, this, you know, you have the
basics, man. I've been using Audition and Reaper. They've been my tools.
Yeah.
Pro Tools.
So you had to learn Pro Tools, and then I was kind of standing here watching you with the mouse, like the mouse was moving like and I was like just standing behind you like, oh my God, this because I'm an editor.
Sometimes still.
I'm a sound editor, so I did like 10 years of my life 8 hours of Pro Tools every day. Like this is like in my sleep, you know, where I'm used to that speed.
Yeah. When I ask you what a shortcut is, you say, I don't know, but you come to the keyboard and just go
without even looking at the keyboard.
And you know. Yeah. You can't tell me, but you can show me, you know.
So yeah, that's my status from being on Pro Tools, and then seeing that was really like, it took a lot of patience from my end. But I could see your dedication and also the willingness to learn and to put in the hours. And also we did in the first week a test that you performed footsteps. So I could see, you know, do you have the talent that is actually needed for someone to be a Foley artist? Because from my goal, I wanted you to be in my team, not only as my recordist or mixer in the end, but also as someone who could potentially step in as a Foley artist later on. How was your experience then from performing sounds yourself and being in that position to, you know, be a student again?
In the beginning, it was tough. It was tough because I haven't been in that environment for 30 years, probably. So it was tough to begin with, but I also realized that over the time that I've been alive, one of the things I enjoy most is learning something. I love learning. I'm a big learner of anything, and I like having learned something. And this is full of those things.
It's a quick cycle from learning to achieving.
Yeah.
That's actually a good thing, huh?
Yeah.
And I mean, I acknowledge that we are now over 40, so our brains are working differently. We are like more in the space of mentoring people than learning new things. Like that's more our main skill set.
Default,
and you're working against your default now. So I also have to acknowledge that when I'm teaching you stuff.
You're saying I'm slow, bro.
I'm saying you are putting so much effort in, and therefore, despite your default, you're quite quick.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And me being impatient, I have to get me a couple of arguments, you know, to uphold this. Because I sometimes have the feeling that I have to do all the things at the same time. And I may be also this triggering me in a way, because this is also how I started becoming a Foley artist. When the studio was built back then in 2015, I was tasked to be the main Foley artist, not knowing how to do it, just from this previous experience with my mentor. And then I also didn't have a proper Foley mixer who was at my side. So we basically tried to hire ADR mixers because they were all freelance and they know how to record, obviously, in a studio. So we tried so many different ADR mixers to record Foley with me. So my position was not only to learn Foley and how to get those results that I know in my head from my experience as a designer and re-recording mixer, but I also had to show these other people how to do the mixing in order to get there. And that was basically crazy task.
Yeah.
And then...
Interesting.
And then I had...
So I'm making you relive that, basically.
Yeah, and then I had a friend of mine.
True PTSD.
Which was a friend of mine. He was almost like my little brother, to be honest. Yeah. And we had a really intense couple of years together in Berlin. And then I got him into the company as an apprentice. And then he was with me all the time in the Foley studio. And I did exactly the same thing that I did with you. Yeah. But the difference here was that my friend, he thought that he doesn't have to learn because he was so talented with the sound. He thought just following my instructions and being able to operate Pro Tools and doing the fading on the board is enough. But then I told him, look, if I'm not here and one button is pressed on that mixing desk, you don't know how to fix it. So please learn your audio basics, become an engineer. You cannot just rely on my knowledge and do your part as a mixer, but you don't know anything about sound. You don't know anything about sound engineering. You don't know how a compressor works, how the routing of the desk works. If I pull one cable, you're lost. If I press one button, you're lost. If there's something you don't know how to troubleshoot, you have to learn this. And this person, as much as I loved him, he was refusing to do that. And then after maybe 1 year or even less than that, I told him, look, you can finish your apprenticeship. We can still record together for the next 1.5 years, but I'm not your mentor anymore because I'm fed up with this. I told you 100 times, learn. You don't do it, so okay, then just do your job. I do mine. And he didn't accept that. And there was like a huge clash. And then this whole thing ended up in a very, like, I don't want to go into this tragedy, but it was really awful. And the friendship was done. He left the company. And then I recorded myself for a while. I learned how to do that, which was great, which I wanted to do anyhow. But then I found another guy who was actually at my level because we did the apprenticeship together 10 years earlier. And he was into Foley all the time, and he recorded Foley all the time.
As an artist?
No, as a mixer.
Yeah, okay.
So then he decided to get hired with my company, and then we joined forces for 1.5 years. And that was actually the 1.5 years that were most important for my development as a Foley artist.
Because you weren't...
Yeah, I wasn't teaching someone while learning the thing myself. You know, I could rely on this guy now, on his ear, on his experience, and he was, you know, he was very good. So we were really like, and we were from the personality point of view. In the 1.5 years we worked together, we had maybe one argument where like we were like pissed. He was pissed at me basically, you know, because I'm a bit more like the dominant person. He could handle that, and then we had only one fight, and we clarified that the same night. So that was pretty good. And in our case, you know, you are even more collaborative in the sense that you can stand my authority, or I don't know, whatever it is. You know, you can handle the hierarchy thing that we don't have when we are friends and at the house, which is very cool. And you also have way more dedication towards learning, and you already have the engineering knowledge. So I don't have to tell you all these things. It's more like the technical part of handling and operating everything. But then you even brought your own mixing desk from your days on set.
I'm so happy that works here, because it just they don't get used anymore, unfortunately. It's a beautiful desk. But
So because recording myself, which I did in the first year having this studio, I don't need like faders, because I cannot perform and then have faders on my and then watch the screen. That doesn't work. I learned how to do the fading with my performance and with the positioning of everything.
Which is another thing we're having to work on as well, isn't it?
But now from operating the Pro Tools and just being barely able to handle that without me going crazy in the background, you then learn the next thing, how to mix microphones and to be really a Foley mixer. So we had to go through that process as well, that you have to learn this, and I have to, as you said, remind you, put the room in, or I have to give you the taste of what is the sound we're looking for. Where is what is the result, and how do we get there? So you have to learn that, and I have to be patient with you going through that learning process. And sometimes for me it felt like I'm back at the studio 10 years ago, being like lost in all the places, doing everything on my own, while I already managed to do everything on my own. Like, okay, now I'm doing this again. I'm standing here. It's too much pressure, because now I'm not employed with a company that always has my back, or I can tell them, look, I need a day more. Now I'm self-employed. It's my name on the line, my business on the line. Everything is on me now. Of course, we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so nothing is on us basically, but
it feels that way.
It feels that way.
The pressure's still there.
The pressure is there, and I have to deliver, and I have to deliver on the highest level, because once you have to, you know, it's so hard to build the reputation, but you can lose it in 1 second. And therefore, it's a lot of pressure to do this, and I know from the last week maybe that we worked together, I thought maybe it takes years for us to get the first proper recording session where I can enjoy the results that we achieve together. So I perform and you mix, and then this thing is actually a lot better than just me doing the thing on my own. I mean, that's the whole point, right? When I have someone to work with me, I want better results. I want to be quicker, more efficient, because I also have to pay you, and therefore it has to be better. Yeah. And I thought, this is impossible. Like I cannot invest 3 more years to get the first experience of, this is working. And then I was really pissed, and you had to endure so much me being pissed and me being frustrated and me being like so involved in getting this result I need in a bad way, in a negative way, for many reasons, because there's another thing that was on my mind, that I delivered one thing and the clients didn't like it. So I thought, okay, I have to fight against that again as well. So I had so many things I fought against that I was really a pain in the ass for you. And you endured that.
Not endured. I respond well to it in a way. It pushes me higher.
Yeah, and that's the thing you told me then when we did the prayer. I apologized, for being an ass, and I also don't want to live a life like that. I want to see towards a light and not always like look to the darkness. And then you said, but in a way it also pushes me. And then I think two days later we had that moment where it actually clicked, and we performed a couple of takes that were really good, and I couldn't achieve them alone. And you did a really nice job on the mixing. So that was a relief, that alhamdulillah.
Light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it didn't take years, it just took days. And then for me, this is worth it, to go through that process of growth, because I know the pain will pay off. And alhamdulillah, like it pays off quicker than expected. How do you feel about this when I explain this to you?
Yeah, I'm going through stuff as well, personally. So it's all kind of happening at the same time. So it's hard to filter which is which, and we know everything's from Allah anyway. So it's everything's happening at the right time. But I'm grateful that I'm able to be here. Basically, I'm grateful not to be on set a lot of the time, because for the reasons I've stated. And we had was it 8 days apart? You went on holiday, and I had a bit of time to reflect. First couple of days on my own were the first days I've had on my own for I don't know how long, a decade maybe longer. And so those couple of days were full of like noise in my head, which would normally be filled by me doing something else or being with somebody else. And then after that time, I had a few days where I had something to work on and I was a bit more busy. So those empty moments were sort of banished. And by the end of the week, I felt like I was in a good place to get back and work. And I think you were as well. You were ready to get back working again. But the break had taken all of the impetus of our previous week's work out of action. So it was again a couple of days to get back into it, wasn't it? This session
that we had just this week.
Yeah,
we finished yesterday.
Yeah. So the first day was difficult for both of us because we
recorded cloth movement, which is simple because you don't have to do a lot of mixing. But then we started with the footsteps, and then after 5 minutes,
really easy, didn't we? We got the cloth done quickly.
It was good.
Yeah.
But then we started the footsteps, and after 5 minutes, I was already like in a rage.
Spitting, yeah.
And then I realized more quickly that I don't want to go through that again, being pissed for days.
Yeah.
And then I just stopped. Said no, it's not working. And we had this like hard conversation, and you also opened up that you don't like to be told that you're worth nothing. like because I said like, dude, I feel like I have to do everything on my own. Like I can do it on my own easier. Like, and then he said like, I know I bring value, and when you tell me, and I have the feeling you telling me I don't bring any value, I don't like that. And my response to that is, I don't do anything, because my argument was then being fully enraged, like, dude, why don't you touch the faders? That's why you're here, yeah? I need you to do your job. Otherwise, I know how to do it alone. Pressing Pro Tools doesn't help. You're ahead of that now. Yeah, I expect more. And he said, yeah, dude, when you like talk to me like that, my reaction is, okay, then if I'm worth nothing, then do it on your own. And I said, but that's not what I mean. And then from that we calmed down, you know. I think it was like, because I understood like, okay, I have to also choose my words more wisely. And then there was like 3 minutes of silence, or maybe 1 minute or something.
More, I think it was.
I was just thinking, like trying to calm myself down and thinking, okay, how can I fix this? You know, how can I come to a place where I'm willing to collaborate again, and to let you do your thing in the space and time you need for it. And I asked you then, okay, are you ready to do it again? He said, yeah, because you're so like the threshold for you, like how much you can take is for me it's insane. I think if I would be in your shoes, I would have like left already like way earlier with someone like me on the other side, you know. So you have this extremely high threshold of taking all this shit from me. And then you said, yeah, okay, let's go on. And then from that point, we both kind of went back to where we should be. Yeah. And then we did it. And then it worked.
Well, we also had Arno's edition.
The spotting thing, because we were always struggling with delivering in time. And there was this pressure on my end that I have to pay you, I have to get the budget from my client and to make this all work. When we let's say we have budget for 3 days, but we work 5 days on it. It's my time on the line. It's your additional 2 days of payment. And then my whole calculation goes really down. And my stress level goes really up. And you know, where's then like when I'm calculating this over time, like where's the breaking even, you know? So that was a bit of stress for me. And then you learned how to do proper spotting.
I'm learning.
You started learning that.
Well, and your podcast with Arno Stefanian really helped, and I read a couple of articles which he details how, in part of his drive for people to be more sound aware, one of the things he needs people to do is to be better at spotting their Foley, which means putting the blank groups for sound effects in the right place on the timeline, so that when you come to record them, there's no trying to find where you need to record, where you stop and start, and those 2 seconds added 500 times a day is a lot of seconds. It wastes time, your time. So if I can cut that out by listening to Arno, which I did, and it worked. It cut out some time, and we flowed really well. We were flowing well anyway, but that really helped just to stick with one surface at a time, one person at a time. I think it could be something that really helps.
Yeah. And the spotting thing was, he was so passionate about it in a LinkedIn post. That motivated me to get in touch with him, and that's also why I asked him to record with me the podcast. So yeah. And
then you said you should.
I told you check it out because you should learn it from him. And yeah. So where does that leave us?
Well, we're in a place where we're on time. We're going to deliver on time, and next week, and the following weeks, it can only get better, I think. This week was a quiet week in a sense compared to last week's first episode of the series, so it was much more detailed, much more going on. This one is a bit more pensive, more dialogue, less effects.
We also saw that in the delivery, the zip file that we delivered for the first episode was 1.2 gigabytes, and the second episode was 900 something megabytes.
So there's definitely less sound in there. So it's been easier in that sense, recording less stuff, but also it allowed us to get in the flow of this new system with the spotting, and hopefully next week we can continue that, and the following weeks the same, and just get better at it. And both of us, in a way, you get better at letting go and sticking to, being able to stick to that would be great, wouldn't it? That you just have to do that, and you don't have to worry about me fiddling around here and me learning how to fiddle around here.
Yeah.
And next, I think we can look for different ways to get other people involved. Like your podcast with Arno was great because it not only it's teaching people best practice, how to do their stuff better, but he's got a drive to get sound awareness for actors and for people involved in film more prevalent. So people like Arno, who are already in the business, who can add value to everybody who's working in this business, but also for us to host people here, I think would be something that we should look to doing. You've got so much experience of how to record sound on your own that we could teach people from the individual all the way through to people working in tandem in Foley studios, how to do some of the work, how to do it better. Certainly on the lower end of the scale.
So that's what I'm already doing with all my content. Instagram and also the YouTube channel is all about this, learning these kind of things. So sound designers who want to learn how to record their own sound effects and even further, maybe Foley performances from home, even though we have to acknowledge that you cannot claim to be a Foley artist if you're not doing it for many, many years.
Well, that's probably something you can debate.
Yeah, not really, because you can record Foley from home, but you cannot think that this is the same that someone would deliver in a Foley studio who has 10 years of experience.
Sure.
Anyhow, I'm willing to help every person who wants to record better sounds at home with my techniques that I developed over those 10 years, and prior to that being as a sound effects editor even longer. So we have the content for people to learn from. We have the studio where people can come to and learn with us in a residency or workshop. And we also have the Foley Guild, which is my online learning community, where I'm hosting regular online meetings every week and people can join, and then we learn together and everyone is sharing what they are up to and what they're working on, and then they have the mentoring aspect in there as well. Having said that, everyone who is willing to join our journey, they can follow you on your profile.
The Foley student.
The Foley student. Mine is the Foley teacher. And there's also the Foley Guild for everyone, and the residencies that come up, coming here to Germany and learn with us.
Yeah, if you're interested, do let us know, because I'm certainly interested in making that happen. People learning from you, facilitating that. Yeah.
All right. So, Mr. Foley student, Sam Sirajuddin Cousins. It's great having you on the podcast, man.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. You made it through the whole episode. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I hope you gained some useful information to elevate within your career. And if you resonate with me as a person as well, you can think about writing me a DM on Instagram saying the word industry and set up a free 20-minute roadmap call with me, because I'm actually looking for new candidates for my Foley Guild. This is a private community where I mentor people to get to the next level within their careers. And if you're interested in that, feel free, write me that DM on Instagram. We can talk and then see what's next. Thank you very much. Enjoy one of the next videos or podcasts. Peace, the Foley teacher.